As designers, our goal is to distill concepts and ideas into compelling visuals. This typically requires some thought and interpretation in order to make the intangible tangible. But what if, no interpretation or thought needed, we could make the intangible tangible? So this is a project that I've been wanting to do for quite a while now, and what this project is going to be is an ad campaign for Skullcandy. So they make things like batteries, headphones, earphones, that kind of stuff. I own a couple of their products and I've always enjoyed using them, but one of the things that I really like about their brand is it's more individualistic and creative. Whenever you think about headphone brands, like let's say Sony for instance, you know, the quality might be there and that's great, but you know, they're kind of bland. They're just kind of like one color, which is fine if that's what you want. But one of the cool things about Skullcandy is they typically offer some different colors or some different patterns, so that way you can kind of make the headphones fit your lifestyle and your look. And so I thought Skullcandy would be a perfect company in order to do some kind of creative project for, because there's an actual client that I would actually like to work with. Now, just to be clear and honest, this is not a project that I'm being hired to do by Skullcandy. I'm doing this all on my own just for the fun of it, so I can have a nice portfolio piece. So this project is not affiliated with them, it's just my own personal project. But maybe we can change that. So the idea that started this project was to turn sound waves into something more physical. So my plan for this project is to turn sound waves into unique design assets that I can use throughout the campaign. So now the question is, how do we do that? So we're gonna do that with this contraption right here. So this is a DIY, poorly made Chladni plate. Essentially how it works is you use this speaker to send sound waves up through this metal bolt that I have onto this plate, and the sound waves will make this plate vibrate, and through those different vibrations, through different frequencies and through different volumes, it'll create different patterns. So I'll use, you know, something like sand or something on top of here, so whenever everything is vibrating, it should all collect onto certain points because of the different frequencies, and it will create patterns that we can then use for design elements. So that's the idea. I've already got it built, so we can actually start doing the experiments right now. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we set a good foundation for this project. So let me quickly go over just kind of analysis of what this campaign should be and what it should look like, and just kind of go over some of the information that I created, as well as I had ChatGPT kind of help me create, so that way we have a good way of making this project feel as realistic as possible without actually having an actual client. So let's get to it. So I created a short document just to distill my thoughts and all the information that I had, so that way I could put it all in one place and have something really nice to just kind of look at throughout the project to make sure that I'm on the right track. So the first page is really just an overview of everything, just kind of talking a little bit about the problem that we're solving, the mission of the company, their tagline, some of their competitors, just some of the general information that I would want to know just to make sure that I am on the right track. You know, I'm not going against their brand. You know, I'm staying within kind of the limitations that they would want me to have. Next, I have what you might call a personality matrix. Really, this is just a graph to visualize the aesthetic approach that we want to do. And then the next page is basically using that personality graph in order to create a mood board to make sure that I have an established visual direction. So that way, whenever I'm making something, I can directly hold it up to this and say, does it fit in with the rest of these graphics? If not, maybe I need to reevaluate or relook at the information that I've written down. Now, the next page is a little bit about the vision, the goal of the project, what are we trying to accomplish, and how we want to go about accomplishing that. Like I said earlier in the video, I'm not actually working for Skullcandy, so this page isn't as important, but I wanted to include it just because if I were working with them, this would be something that I would present to them. So this is just kind of another good way to get some more experience in doing some different things, as well as just help make this document feel a little bit more rounded out rather than just kind of me running off of my own brain and my own thoughts. I have something here that is set in stone and I can look at and reference it if I need it. Now, the last page is kind of like a word map. It's just some of the key words and phrases that I want to reference throughout the project. Those are the ones that I'm kind of focusing on. So for instance, I wrote down people, individuality, self-expression, because that's something that's important to the Skullcandy brand. They're all about having something that's unique to you and fits your lifestyle. So there's a big piece of the puzzle that is all about being individual and kind of being person to person, rather than having something that's just for everybody. It's just one thing. Now, using this document, I was able to come up with a couple of just rough ideas, just some tests. I really just wanted to see what I could make using the Chladni patterns. That way I could kind of get a feel for how do they work? What do I think works best? So that way I could kind of plan ahead rather than just kind of make all the patterns and then hope that it works out. So here are a couple of the designs that I came up with. I'm still figuring out the exact direction that I want to go with, but I do feel like I have some good ideas here that I can definitely work off of. So I feel like we're at least in a good enough spot to where I feel like we can move on to the actual creation of the design assets. So that way, once we actually have those assets, we'll have a good idea and a good direction to move in. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into the actual fun of creating these patterns. So get to it. All right, so I've got everything hooked up. I actually haven't tried out anything yet. So this will be kind of like a first reaction. We'll see what happens as we go. So I guess pretty much the only thing left to do is to just give it a shot and see what happens. Okay, so I think one problem that we have here, which would be a pretty easy fix, is I think nothing is quite leveled here, so it's kind of sliding all off this way, but we need to get all the sand to move. So it is working. So let me see if I can make a couple tweaks and make it actually work, and then we'll get back to it. Alrighty, so I've been at this for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, just trying to fiddle with the settings to see if I can make any pattern. I was starting to think that, maybe I messed up somewhere and I just don't know exactly, what to do in order to make it work. So like, it could have been the metal plate, the hole that I drilled, the way that I set up the speaker. I wasn't really sure, but I started trying to just see if maybe what I could do, take a more scientific approach, which is to say, okay, let's try these different variables and see if we can narrow down the field into something that might be usable. So one of the things that I noticed is whenever I'm using a lower frequency, the metal plate would bounce the salt around a lot. Like there was a lot of movement. It was very exaggerated, and it was to the point where all of the salt would just fall off. And so what I came to the conclusion of, or at least my thought process was, maybe what I need to do is use a higher frequency so that way the sound waves would be smaller, so that way they're not vibrating the metal plate as much, but I would just need to make it louder to make sure that the vibrations are actually enough to actually cause the salt to move. And while it might be hard to see on this, I'm actually starting to see some sort of a pattern emerge on the plate using that exact thought process. So I'm thinking that that's actually the way to do it. So I'm going to keep trying to figure out some different frequencies, and hopefully from here, we can actually get something usable. So let's keep at it. So things didn't go quite as planned. I was struggling to get the pattern to show up across the entire metal plate. I could really only get it to show up in pretty much like 1/4 of it, maybe half if I was lucky. And even then, I only really managed to get like maybe 4 different patterns of it, because really I was kind of constrained to the frequencies that I was able to use, because if it was too low, it would move around the sand too much and I wouldn't be able to get pattern. And if it was too high, I couldn't get the volume to go up high enough in order to make a resonance that would actually move the salt or sand or the sugar that I was using. And that was after messing with it for like an hour or two, just trying to get something that I could use, trying to get as much as I possibly could, and it just wasn't enough. And honestly, I was terrified that I might actually have to just start from the beginning and scratch everything that I've done up to this point. But there was one thing that I had yet to do that actually might be able to save me, and that was being desperate. After realizing that I just wasn't going to be able to make these patterns on my own, I was like, you know what? There's got to be somebody on the internet that has pictures of these patterns and will let me use them. So I just started frantically looking across the internet, trying to see if I could find some kind of database or someone selling the patterns that I could use, anything that could get me those patterns that were actually made from a Chladni plate that I would be able to use in my project. And in my search, I managed to find a ceramic studio that makes tiles based off of Chladni patterns. I emailed them out of desperation, pretty much just saying, I know I'm a complete stranger, but I need some help, and I would be more than happy to either, pay them or kind of do some kind of trade or work something out so that way, I'm not just taking their work for nothing. And they were actually nice enough to give me a call back, and we worked out a deal, and we were able to just do a little quick trade of some services, and they were able to let me use the patterns that they came up with. So if you're interested in ceramics or tiles, please make sure to go check them out because they're really great people and they helped me out a lot. And the work that they do is beautiful, and I definitely think it's worth checking out. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description for them in case you're interested. So I technically wasn't able to make the patterns myself, but I did do the experiment using a DIY Chladni plate, and I am using some patterns that were made from an actual Chladni plate, so give me some slack. But now that I actually have those patterns and I can use them, we can actually get started on making the designs. So without further ado, let's get to it. Oh, goodness. You ever feel like you try a bunch of stuff and no matter what you do, it just turns out terrible? Well, anyways, that's pretty much where I'm at. And what's really annoying is I feel like I'm really close to being where I want to be, but I'm not quite there. And no matter what I do, no matter what I tweak, it seems like I just can't quite nail it. The colors are off, or it's too chaotic, there's too much going on, it's not legible enough. I asked some of my designer friends and some of my non-designer friends what they thought, and I got a bunch of different thoughts and reactions to things, so I'm kind of at this point where I just feel overwhelmed and kind of lost. Do I just give up and start over? Like, am I just going down the wrong rabbit hole and this is all not worth doing? I don't know. It also doesn't help that I struggled with the Chladni pattern, so 2 failures in a row, so I don't really have a lot of momentum with this project. I don't know. It just sucks. So I guess this is just one of those projects where everything goes wrong no matter what you do, but I guess the only thing I can do at this point is just take a break, come back to it later, and hope I can figure something else out. So I guess I'll talk to you later. Hey, we're back. So I stepped away from this project for a couple days, just trying to clear my head and maybe come back with some new ideas. And in that time, I had another designer friend that I asked their opinion on get back to me finally, and they had an idea that eventually kind of brought me down a path to getting to where I'm at currently. So before, this is pretty much how I was designing everything. Like I said, it just really wasn't quite there. It was so close, but it just wasn't quite there. And he brought up a good idea, which is that it doesn't necessarily translate to audio or sound waves. So while thematically the patterns work and they look good, it doesn't necessarily translate to audio. So something that he suggested was to bring in some imagery that would kind of reinforce the idea that it's coming from sound waves, and that's what we're looking at. So I went back to the drawing board, I went over a couple different things, a couple different iterations, just to try to find something that kind of fit the bill, and then I finally landed here. Now this by itself doesn't completely solve all of my problems, but it's a huge step in the right direction. It helps tone down some of the more chaotic patterns, and it also helps with having the product stand off from the background. But now that I finally have something that I'm confident with, and I can translate to a bunch of different formats, I think we can finally get to making all of the graphics for this ad campaign. So let's get to it. So after chipping away at this project for a few months, I can finally say we're finished. I feel like this ad campaign that I've made is much different from the stuff that I typically make. I usually like a more limited color palette. It's very high in contrast, and this is pretty much the exact opposite of that. Which I think explains why I had a little bit of a struggle with the colors, because I really wanted to make something that was like really high in contrast, but that's just not what this project called for. This project needed a specific color palette for each of the designs, and I couldn't just copy and paste every single color palette across the entire thing. I really had to be careful about which colors and which hues and with the luminance values for each of the colors in each of the color palettes. But I think using that approach was much better for this project, and I think in the end it's made me a little bit better of a designer. I didn't even get to use the patterns in the way that I thought they would, but I think the way that they ended up is actually better. Instead of being the main focal element of all the pieces, they kind of blend in, but they add a little bit of extra detail that makes every design feel a little bit more unique. So again, I think that's just another example of each project being different than what you think whenever you start, and you just have to figure your way through it. But as you overcome those obstacles, the project gets better, and so do you as a designer. So yeah, this project definitely wasn't the easiest, but I think because of it, I'll be a little bit better of a designer, and I think at the end, I'm actually still really happy with how everything came out. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is that I collaborated with a friend of mine to do some motion graphics. Whenever I had asked for some feedback, there was a couple people, and including myself, that thought, man, these would look really great if there were some motion graphics to go with them. Like, yeah, the designs look great and everything, but like adding some motion to them would really take them to the next level. So I asked around and I got in contact with Geoff, and he was more than willing to help me out with this project. So Geoff, if you're watching this, I know I'm probably not the easiest person to work with, but I really appreciate your work, and I think that these turned out great. So if you need motion graphics for your project, or you're just feeling nice and want to give him a follow or a shout out, please do so. I also want to mention that I met Geoff through Maker Division. Maker Division is a platform to help creatives build businesses that they love. It's something that I've been a part of for almost the last year, and is the only reason that I've been able to make it even this far as a freelance graphic designer. Now, this video isn't sponsored by them, but I do have affiliate links, so if you do sign up, I actually get a little bit of kickback. So if you want to help me out and get a head start on starting your own creative business, then please check out Maker Division and use my affiliate links to sign up. Links in the description below. With all that out of the way, I'd love to know what you guys thought about this project. Did I do a good job? Did I do a bad job? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you found this video helpful or entertaining in any way, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video.